Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The Delta Moon Juke Joint was a slice of Mississippi magic tucked on the edge of Clarksdale, where the cotton fields met the lazy roll of the Mississippi River. Its weathered wooden walls groaned under the weight of 1,000 blues songs, and the neon sign buzzed like a firefly, casting a golden glow over the gravel lot. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of bourbon-fried catfish and dreams too big for a small town. The jukebox wailed a Muddy Waters tune, and the crowd, a mix of locals, truckers, and lost souls, clapped along their laughter, weaving through the guitar's mournful cry. Nia Coleman moved through the chaos like a queen in her own quiet kingdom. At 25, she was a vision. Her rich brown skin shimmered under the dim lights. Her curly hair spilled over her shoulders, and her eyes, deep as the river outside, sparkled with a stubborn hope. Her red silk dress hugged her curves, swaying as she balanced a tray of beers, dodging a drunk who tried to grab her hand. Nia didn't speak, not because she couldn't, but because her voice had been locked away since her mama's heart gave out 11 years ago. A psychosomatic cage, the doctors called it, born of grief, too heavy for a kid to carry. She communicated with quick, graceful signs and notes scribbled on a pad tucked in her apron. Tonight's favorite. Don't mess with my blues, y'all. Clarksdale was home, but it wasn't kind. The cotton fields stretched endless under the moon, their white tufts glowing like ghosts, and the town's dusty roads held Nia's dreams in a chokehold. She lived with her grandma, Miss Hattie, in a creaky wooden house that smelled of gumbo and old hymns. Nia wanted more to teach literature to fill kids' heads with Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, but the bank was circling Hattie's house like a vulture, and every dollar Nia earned went to keeping the lights on. Still, she smiled, her warmth cutting through the Delta's humid haze, and her notes were sharp enough to make even the grumpiest trucker laugh. "Girl, you too fine to be slinging beers," Keisha Vaughn called from the stage, her fingers dancing over her guitar strings. Keisha, Nia's best friend, was all fire dreadlocks, tied high, a leather vest, and a grin that could start a riot. She was mid-song, her voice, a smoky blend of blues and sass, but she never missed a chance to tease. "Get up here and sing, Nia. You know you got pipes somewhere in that silent soul." Nia rolled her eyes, signing back with a smirk. "Keep strumming, rockstar. I'm busy." The crowd chuckled, used to their banter, and Keisha winked, launching into Crossroad Blues with a wail that shook the rafters. At the bar, Miss Hattie was holding court, her silver braids gleaming as she poured bourbon for a regular. At 65, Hattie was Clarksdale's unofficial queen, part seamstress, part preacher, all mischief. She'd raised Nia since her mama passed, teaching her sign language and how to throw shade with a pen. "That boy over there's trouble," Hattie said, nodding toward a corner table, her voice low and teasing. "Got eyes like a storm, but I'd take him for a spin." Nia followed her gaze, and her breath caught. The man was new. Not one of the usual drifters. He sat in a wheelchair, his broad shoulders filling out a faded flannel shirt, his jeans worn but clean. His hair was dark brown, tousled like he'd been driving with the windows down, and his eyes green-gray, sharp as a hawk's, watched the room with a mix of curiosity and caution. A faint scar traced his jaw, adding a rugged edge to his face. He was handsome, no question, but it was the way he held himself, like a man carrying a secret, that made Nia's pulse skip. She glided over tray in hand and slid a bourbon onto his table. Her pen scratched out a note. "Bourbon or blues? What's your vibe?" She held it up, her smile playful but guarded. The man read it, and a slow grin spread across his face, softening the storm in his eyes. "Both." "If you're pourin'," he said, his voice low and warm, like gravel smoothed by a river. "Name's Lucas. You got a name, or do I just call you Trouble?" Nia's cheeks warmed, but she didn't flinch. She wrote Nia, Trouble's my middle name, but you look like you lost a fight with a tractor. She raised an eyebrow, daring him to bite. Lucas laughed, a rich sound that cut through the jukebox's wail. Fair enough, he said, leaning forward. I'm from Charlottesville, just passing through. You write like a poet, Nia. Ever think of teaching kids? Her heart twinged. He'd hit her dream square on, and it felt like he'd seen right through her. She scribbled, only if they like blues and bad bourbon. You a drifter or a dreamer? Both, he said, his grin turning sly. But I'm dreaming about you now. Nia's breath hitched and she busied herself wiping the table, hiding her flush. The man was smooth, too smooth, and those eyes were trouble. Hattie had warned her about. But when Keisha's song ended and the crowd roared, Lucas didn't clap. He kept watching Nia like she was the only soul in the room. The night wore on, the joint growing louder, sweatier. Nia darted between tables, but Lucas's presence was a magnet pulling her back. He ordered another bourbon, and their notes flew fast. Her teasing his tractor chic style, him asking about her favorite poet. Hughes always. When Keisha struck up Crossroad Blues, a slow, sultry number, Lucas leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper. Walk with me, Nia. Just to the fields. I ain't one for dancing in here. She hesitated, her mama's warnings about strangers ringing in her ears, but something in his eyes, raw, honest, made her nod. She signed to Keisha. Back in 10, Keisha smirked, mouthing, spill the tea later. Outside, the delta air was warm, heavy with the scent of cotton and river mud. The moon hung low, bathing the fields in silver, the cotton bolls glowing like stars on earth. Nia pushed Lucas's wheelchair along a dirt path, the wheels crunching softly. They stopped where the field stretched wide, the world quiet except for the faint hum of crickets and the juke joint's distant wail. Lucas pulled a small flask from his pocket, the bourbon inside catching the moonlight. Care to share? He asked, offering it. Nia took a sip, the burn warming her chest, and passed it back, her fingers brushing his. The touch was electric, sending a shiver down her spine. She wrote, You always bribe girls with booze. He chuckled, taking a swig. Only the ones who write better than me. Tell me, Nia, what's a girl like you doing in a place like this? She signed, her hand steady but her heart racing. Surviving, dreaming, you same. He said, his voice softer now, almost broken. Looking for something real. The words hung between them, heavy as the delta night. Nia's eyes locked on his and the world narrowed. The cotton, the moon. The blues fading to a hum. Lucas reached for her hand, his fingers warm and calloused, and she didn't pull away. The flask fell to the dirt, forgotten as he tugged her closer, her red dress brushing his knees. Her breath hitched her lips, tingling with a need she hadn't felt in years. Nia, he whispered, his voice a plea, and then she was leaning down, her curls falling like a curtain, her lips finding his. The kiss was fire velvet and bourbon, fierce and desperate, stealing her breath. His hands slid to her waist, fingers tracing the silk of her dress, pulling her closer until she was half in his lap, her heart pounding against his. The cotton fields stood witness, their whispers lost in the heat of the moment, and when they broke apart, gasping. Nia's cheeks burned under the moonlight. She stumbled back, her hands trembling as she signed. I don't do this. But her eyes said otherwise, and Lucas's grin was pure trouble. Me neither, he said, his voice husky, but I'm damn glad we did. Nia fled to the joint, her pulse a drumbeat, her lips still tingling. Keisha pounced the second she walked in. Girl, you kissin' randos in the cotton fields now. Spill the tea, she hollered, her guitar slung over her shoulder. The crowd laughed and Nia scribbled, Mind your strings, rock star, her blush giving her away. Miss Hattie sidled up, her eyes twinkling. That boy's got eyes like trouble, but I ain't mad, she said, pouring a shot. Just don't go losing your heart too fast, baby girl. Nia nodded, but her heart was already halfway gone. Lucas's kiss had lit a spark, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change. She didn't see her cousin Darius lurking by the bar, his smile sharp as a blade, counting the cash he'd gotten from a deal he hadn't told her about. The next morning, Darius cornered her at Hattie's house, the cotton fields stretching behind them like a silent jury. "Got a way to save this place," he said, his voice slick. "A job in Charlottesville working for a rich family, $3,000 a month. Nia, all you gotta do is sign some papers for an inheritance deal. Easy money." Nia's gut twisted. Darius was slipperier than a catfish, but Hattie's house was on the line and her dreams were drowning in debt. She signed the papers, her pen hesitating over the fine print she couldn't quite read. Inheritance. Darius had called it a chance to start over. She didn't know it was a lie. A forged will tying her to Lucas Hayes in a marriage she'd never agreed to, brokered by Amos Hayes for $500,000 to save his grandson from himself. As Nia boarded a Greyhound bus, her small suitcase packed with dreams and doubts, Clarksdale faded in the rear view. The cotton fields whispered her name, and Lucas's kiss lingered like a song she couldn't forget. She was headed for Charlottesville for a job, or so she thought that would either break her or make her whole. What she didn't know was that the man with the storm-gray eyes was waiting, and their collision would set the Delta on fire. Hey folks, that moonlit kiss was straight fire. Will Nia find love or get burned in Charlottesville? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe with the bell to catch every twist of this soulful love story. Stay tuned. The Hayes estate sprawled across the rolling hills of Charlottesville, Virginia, like a postcard from a dream Nia Coleman never dared to have. The main house was a vision of southern elegance. White columns wrap around porch and windows that caught the golden glow of the Shenandoah Valley. Beyond it, pastures stretched green and endless, dotted with sleek thoroughbreds grazing under the watchful eye of ancient oaks. A stable of weathered cedar stood proud, its doors open to the scent of hay and leather, while a small lake shimmered at the edge of the property, reflecting the Blue Ridge Mountains' hazy peaks. The air was crisp, laced with wildflowers and the faint tang of fermenting grapes from the estate's vineyard. It was paradise. But to Nia, it felt like a gilded cage. She'd arrived 3 days ago, her suitcase lighter than her heart, expecting a job as a caretaker for a wealthy family. That's what her cousin Darius had promised back in Clarksdale, a chance to earn $3,000 a month, enough to save Miss Hattie's house from the bank's claws. But the papers she'd signed, the ones Darius called an inheritance deal, were a lie. Not a job, but a forged will, binding her in marriage to Lucas Hayes, the man whose bourbon-soaked kiss still burned on her lips. She'd stood in Amos Hayes's oak-paneled office, her hands trembling as the old man explained the deal with a voice smooth as aged whiskey. "My grandson needs a spark," he'd said, his gray eyes sharp. "You're it, Miss Coleman. Stay, and you'll want for nothing." Nia had wanted to run, to scream, but her voice was still locked in its silent prison, and her wallet held nothing but lint. Clarksdale was a world away, and the Mississippi River didn't flow backward, so she stayed her red silk dress swapped for jeans and a plaid shirt, her curls tied back as she threw herself into work. She scrubbed floors, fed horses, and carried trays to Lucas's room, her hands rough but steady. The estate was a machine, maids bustling, grooms tending the stables, and Amos ruling it all like a king. But Lucas was a storm cloud, his presence darkening every hall. She found him in the library that morning, the room a fortress of leather-bound books and sunlight streaming through tall windows. He sat in his wheelchair, his flannel shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his scar catching the light as he stared at a chessboard. Those green-gray eyes, The ones that had undone her in the cotton fields were cold now, sharp with distrust. So he said, not looking up, "You're the one my granddaddy bought. What's your angle, Nia?" "Money. A free ride." Nia's chest tightened, her fingers clenching the tray of coffee she'd brought. She set it down her pen, scratching out a note. "I ain't here for your cash, cowboy. I got played same as you." She slid it across the table, her jaw tight. Lucas read it, his lips twitching, but his voice stayed hard. "Played, huh? That's a good one. You signed the papers, didn't you? Or do you just scribble your name on anything for a paycheck?" Her eyes stung, but she didn't flinch. She signed her hands, sharp and deliberate. "I trusted family." "My mistake. You want to hate me, fine, but I'm not your enemy." She turned to leave, her boots clicking on the hardwood, but his voice stopped her. "Wait," he said, softer now. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to people sticking around." Nia paused, her back to him. Her heart a tug-of-war between anger and something softer. She wrote, "Get used to it. I'm stubborn as a Delta mule." She tossed the note over her shoulder, catching the ghost of a smile on his face as she walked out. Life on the estate settled into a rhythm, but it wasn't easy. Nia woke at dawn, her days filled with chores, polishing silver mucking stalls, hauling water for the horses. The staff whispered about her, their eyes lingering on her dark skin, her silence, the mystery of why Amos had brought her here. She ignored them, her mind on Hattie's house, on the kids she'd teach one day, on Lucas's kiss that wouldn't leave her alone. She saw him everywhere, by the lake and the stables, his wheelchair a silent barrier between them. He was gruff, snapping when she adjusted his blanket or brought him coffee, but she noticed things, the way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking. The untouched plates he sent back, the restless creak of his chair at night. One afternoon she found him in the stables, stroking the muzzle of a chestnut mare named Dixie. The air smelled of hay and horse sweat, and Nia's short denim skirt caught the breeze as she carried a bucket of feed. Lucas glanced up, his eyes lingering a beat too long before he looked away. "You ever ride?" he asked, his voice gruff. Nia shook her head. "Riding horses scare me. Too big. You used to," he said, his gaze distant. "Before the accident. Broke my legs. Killed my best friend. Ain't much for riding now." Her heart twinged. She signed, "I'm sorry." Then, hesitating, she wrote, "What was he like?" Lucas's jaw tightened, but he answered, his voice low. "Trey was loud, always laughing, always pushing me to be better. He didn't deserve to go like that." He looked at her, his eyes raw. "Why do you care?" She signed, her hands steady. "Because you're human." The words hung there, simple but heavy, and for a moment the stable was silent, except for Dixie's soft snort. That night the estate buzzed with a barn dance, a monthly tradition for the staff and local gentry. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over bales of hay, and a makeshift dance floor. A local band played twangy country tunes, and the air smelled of barbecue and cheap beer. Nia had been roped into helping, her plaid shirt tied at the waist, her skirt swaying as she carried pitchers of sweet tea. She felt Lucas's eyes on her from across the barn, his wheelchair parked by a table, a glass of bourbon in his hand. Keisha had arrived that morning, her guitar slung over her shoulder, ready to crash the party. "Girl, you livin' in a damn castle now," she'd teased, hugging Nia tight. "Where's that bourbon boy? I need to size him up." Nia had signed, "Behave, or I'll hide your strings." But Keisha was already strumming her blues riffs, blending with the band's country beat, drawing cheers from the crowd. As the night heated up, the band switched to a slow number, a cover of Tennessee whiskey that made the barn feel like a church. Nia was refilling a pitcher when Lucas rolled up his eyes, glinting with something dangerous. "Dance with me," he said. Not a question. She raised an eyebrow, writing, "You sure I ain't exactly Shania Twain?" He grinned, the first real smile she'd seen. "And I ain't exactly mobile, but we'll make it work. Come on, darling." Her pulse skipped, but she set the pitcher down and pushed his chair to the edge of the floor. The crowd parted, some whispering, others smiling. Nia stood close, her hands on his shoulders, his on her waist, and they swayed her skirt, brushing his knees. The music wrapped them in a cocoon, and Lucas's touch was warm, steady, sending heat through her veins. Her curls fell loose, grazing his cheek, and his breath hitched his fingers tightening. "Your trouble, Nia Coleman," he murmured, his voice husky. She signed her hands, teasing. "You're just figuring that out." But her eyes were soft, and the barn spun away, leaving just them. The spell broke when Rhea Marshall stormed in her heels, clicking like gunfire. She was Trey's sister, her dark eyes blazing with grief and fury, her silk dress out of place among the denim and boots. She zeroed in on Lucas, her voice cutting through the music. "You're dancing with her," she spat, glaring at Nia. "A mute girl from nowhere. You think you can replace Trey with this?" "Nobody." Nia froze, her hands dropping. The crowd hushed the band, faltering. Lucas's jaw clenched, but before he could speak, Rhea turned on Nia. "You don't belong here. You're just Amos's pawn, playing wife for a paycheck." The words hit like a slap, and Nia's eyes stung. She signed her hands, shaking. "I'm not your enemy." But Rhea laughed, cold and sharp, and the crowd's whispers grew louder. Nia turned and fled her boots, pounding the dirt as she ran to the lake, the music fading behind her. The water was still reflecting the stars, and she sank to her knees, tears spilling over. She'd trusted Darius, believed in a chance, and now she was trapped. Her silence a chain she couldn't break. Footsteps crunched behind her, and she knew it was Lucas before he spoke. He rolled up his chair, sinking slightly in the grass, his face shadowed but soft. "Nia," he said, his voice rough. "I'm sorry Rhea's hurtin', but she had no right." Nia shook her head, signing. "She's right. I don't belong. I'm just a fool who signed a lie." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against her cold ones. "You belong wherever you choose to be," he said, his eyes fierce. "And I'm damn glad you're here." Her tears fell harder, but she didn't pull away. Lucas tugged her closer, and she sank beside him, her head on his shoulder, the lake lapping softly, his arm wrapped around her strong and steady, and for the first time since Clarksdale. Nia felt like she wasn't alone. The stars above burned bright, but the storm was coming. Rhea's anger, Darius's betrayal, and a truth neither of them was ready to face. Back at the barn, Keisha was waiting, her guitar case packed. "You okay, girl?" she asked, her voice soft. Nia nodded, writing. "I will be," but her heart was a battlefield, and Lucas's touch was a spark she couldn't ignore. She was in deeper than she'd planned, and the Delta's whispers were growing louder. The Appalachian mountains rose like ancient giants, their sycamore and oak forests cloaking the Virginia hills in a green so deep it felt alive. The Hayes family's retreat was a rustic haven tucked in a valley where a clear stream babbled over mossy rocks, and a small farmhouse stood weathered but proud. Wildflowers dotted the meadow, their colors fierce against the gray stone of a hidden cave nearby, its mouth half concealed by vines. The air was cool, scented with pine and earth, and the distant cry of a hawk echoed through the peaks. For Nia Coleman, it was a world away from the cotton fields of Clarksdale, Mississippi, and the polished pastures of the Hayes estate in Charlottesville. It was freedom, or as close as she'd get, while her heart was tangled in a lie. She'd been at the estate for 2 weeks, her days a blur of chores and stolen glances with Lucas Hayes, the man whose kiss had set her soul on fire back in the Delta. But the forged will that bound her to him in marriage, a cruel trick by her cousin Darius, hung over her like a storm cloud. Lucas's apology by the lake, his arm around her after Rhea Marshall's venomous words had cracked her defenses, but trust was a fragile thing. Nia's silence, her psychosomatic muteness born of her mama's death, was a wall she couldn't climb, and Lucas's own pain, his survivor's guilt from the accident that took his friend Trey, made him a fortress of his own. Lucas had insisted on this trip, calling it a chance to clear their heads after Rhea's outburst at the barn dance. Nia wasn't so sure. The tension between them was a live wire sparking every time their eyes met, and the Appalachian retreat felt like a test she hadn't studied for. She stood on the farmhouse porch now, her denim jacket loose over a white tank top, her curls swaying in the breeze. The stream glittered under the morning sun, and Lucas was by the water, his wheelchair catching the light as he tossed pebbles, his flannel shirt rolled up to reveal forearms tanned and strong. He looked up, catching her stare, and grinned a slow, dangerous curve that made her pulse skip. "Quit gawking and come help me," he called, his voice teasing. "Unless you're scared of getting wet." Nia rolled her eyes, signing. "Scared? You're the one who'd sink like a rock." She grabbed her notepad, scribbling. "What's the plan? Cowboy? Fishing? Or just looking pretty?" He laughed, the sound rich and warm cutting through the mountain air. "Bit of both. There's a cave up the trail. Thought we'd explore, you game." She hesitated, her mama's warnings about dark places flickering in her mind. But Lucas's eyes were soft, not stormy, and she nodded, tucking her pen behind her ear. They set off, Nia pushing his chair along a dirt path, the wheels crunching over pine needles. The trail wound through the forest, the trees whispering secrets, and the cave loomed ahead, its entrance cool and shadowed, and Nia's boots slipped on wet stone as they entered the air damp and heavy, the walls glittering with flecks of quartz. A small stream ran through its ripples, catching the flashlight. Lucas held painting their faces in silver. "Ever been in a place like this?" he asked, his voice echoing. Nia shook her head, signing. "Too spooky for Clarksdale." "You once as a kid," he said, his tone softer. "Trey dared me to sleep in one. I lasted an hour before running home to my mama." He chuckled, but his eyes were distant, haunted by the friend he'd lost. Nia's heart twinged. She wrote, "Tell me about him." She held the note up, her gaze steady. Lucas looked at her surprised, then nodded. "Trey was family. Always had my back, always pushed me to dream big. We were racing that night, just messing around when the truck flipped. I woke up in a hospital, legs gone, Trey gone. Been blaming myself ever since." She signed, her hands gentle. "It wasn't your fault," but his jaw tightened, and he looked away, the cave's shadows swallowing his reply. They explored deeper, the silence between them, heavy but not unkind. Nia's tank top clung to her skin, damp from the cave's mist, and Lucas's shirt was half unbuttoned, revealing a glimpse of his chest that made her cheeks warm. She focused on the stream, her fingers trailing the water until she noticed a leather wallet poking from Lucas's bag. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pulled it out, expecting a driver's license. Instead, a folded article slipped free. Its headline, "Stark Haze Heir Inherits Billions After Tragedy." Her breath caught. She scanned the page, her heart pounding. Lucas wasn't just some drifter from Charlottesville. He was Lucas Hayes, heir to Hayes Estates, a billionaire empire of horses, wine, and land. The man she'd kissed, the man she'd danced with, had lied about who he was. Her hands shook as she held up the article, signing, "You lied to me." Lucas's face paled, the flashlight casting harsh shadows. "Nia, I can explain." She cut him off, her signs, sharp and angry. "Explain what? That you're a billionaire playing poor, that you let me think you were just some guy." Her eyes stung, the betrayal cutting deeper than Darius's scam. She'd trusted him, let him in, and he'd hidden the truth. I didn't want you to know, he said, his voice rough. Every woman I've ever cared about saw dollar signs. Not me. I thought you were different, Nia. I thought you saw me. She scribbled her pen, slashing the page. I did. But you didn't trust me enough to be real. She turned to leave her boots splashing in the stream, but the cave's walls seemed to close in, and her chest tightened. The flashlight flickered, plunging them into near darkness, and Lucas's voice broke through. Nia, please, he said, rolling closer, his hand grazing her arm. I was scared. Scared you'd look at me like everyone else. I'm sorry. She froze her back to him, tears welling. The cave was silent except for the drip of water and the weight of his words pressed against her. She signed, her hands trembling. I trusted you. Don't make me regret it. He reached for her, his fingers brushing her wrist, and she turned her eyes locking on his. The cave's dim light caught the water on her skin, her tank top clinging to her curves, and Lucas's breath hitched. You're the realest thing I've got, he whispered, his voice raw. Don't walk away. The air crackled the cave, a cocoon of heat and shadow. Nia's resolve crumbled, and she stepped closer, her hands cupping his face, her thumbs tracing his scar. She leaned in her lips, crashing against his, a kiss fierce and desperate, tasting of salt and need. His hands slid to her waist, pulling her onto his lap, her damp clothes pressing against his, the stream's mist swirling around them. Her curls tangled in his fingers and his lips moved to her neck, sending shivers down her spine. The kiss was a storm washing away her anger, her fear, and when they broke apart, gasping, Nia's heart was a wildfire. She signed, her hands shaky but sure. Don't lie to me again. Never. He said, his eyes fierce. I swear it. They sat there wrapped in each other, the cave's whispers fading. But the moment was fleeting. Keisha's voice echoed from the trail, her guitar case banging against the rocks. Y'all making out in a cave now? She hollered, her dreadlocks bouncing as she appeared, flashlight in hand. This ain't Twilight. Nia, get your butt out here. Nia laughed, the sound silent but bright. Signing. At least I ain't sparklin'. Lucas grinned, his hands still on her waist, and Keisha shook her head, muttering, I need popcorn for this mess. Back at the farmhouse, Miss Hattie had arrived, her silver braids gleaming as she stirred a pot of gumbo on the wood stove. She'd come to check on Nia, her presence a balm after the cave's storm. You look like you've been wrestling a bear baby girl, Hattie said, her eyes twinkling. That boy trouble yet? Nia wrote. The best kind, but her smile was cautious. The article's weight still heavy. That night they gathered by the stream, a fire crackling under the stars. Keisha strummed her guitar, her blues riffs weaving through the mountain air, and Hattie hummed along, her voice rich and warm. Nia sat beside Lucas, her knee brushing his, and when Keisha played Ain't No Sunshine. Nia's hands moved, signing the lyrics, her face alight with a joy she hadn't felt in years. Lucas watched, his eyes soft, and took her hand, his fingers tracing her palm. Your mama loved that song, Hattie said, her voice quiet. She'd be proud. Nia, you're finding your light. Nia's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. She signed. I'm trying. Lucas squeezed her hand, his touch an anchor, and for a moment the world was perfect. The fire, the blues, the mountains holding them close. But perfection was a lie, and Ria's anger was a shadow creeping closer. The article had opened a door, but it hadn't shown Nia the whole truth. Lucas was a billionaire, yes, but he was also a man running from his past, and Nia was about to learn how deep those scars ran. As the fire died, Keisha leaned over, her voice low. You forgave him too quick, girl, she said, half teasing, half serious. What's he hiding next? A secret lair? Nia wrote. If he's Batman, I'm keeping the cape. But her laugh was shaky, and her eyes lingered on Lucas, wondering what other secrets the mountains held. The Hayes estate in Charlottesville was a kingdom of green and gold, its pastures rolling under the Virginia sun like a quilt stitched by God himself. The main house gleamed with southern pride, its white columns catching the light while the stables hummed with the soft snorts of thoroughbreds and the clink of bridles. Beyond the Shenandoah Valley's hills rose gentle and proud, their vineyards heavy with grapes that promised wine as rich as the earth. The lake by the estate sparkled a mirror for the Blue Ridge Mountains' hazy peaks, and the air carried the sweet bite of hay leather and possibility for Nia Coleman. It was a battlefield where every day tested her heart and her silence. 3 weeks had passed since the Appalachian retreat, since the cave where Lucas Hayes's truth that he was a billionaire, not a drifter, had shaken her world. The kiss they'd shared fierce and wet in the quartz-lit shadows had sealed something between them. A bond Nia couldn't name, but couldn't deny. She was still trapped by the forged will her cousin Darius had tricked her into signing a lie that made her Lucas's wife on paper. But the estate was her home now, for better or worse, and she'd carved a place in it. She scrubbed floors, tended horses, and enrolled in online literature classes, her nights filled with Langston Hughes and dreams of teaching kids. Her silence, the psychosomatic muteness born of her mama's death, was a weight she carried. But Lucas's presence, his storm-gray eyes, his rare smiles, was a spark that kept her going. Nia stood in the stable yard, now her denim skirt dusted with hay, her plaid shirt tied at the waist, curls spilling from a loose ponytail. She was hauling a bucket of oats, her arms strong from weeks of work when Lucas rolled up his wheelchair crunching over gravel. His flannel was open at the collar, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin, and his scar caught the sunlight, a quiet reminder of the accident that had stolen his legs and his friend Trey. You look like you're fixin' to wrestle a bull. He teased, his voice warm but edged with the gruffness she'd come to love. She smirked, signing, "Better a bull than your bad attitude." She scribbled a note. "You here to help or just look pretty?" Lucas laughed, the sound rich as the valley's earth. "Pretty's my default, darling, but I'll hold the bucket if you stop making eyes at that stallion." Nia's cheeks warmed, but she tossed him the bucket, her fingers brushing his. The touch was brief, but it sent a shiver through her, a reminder of the cave of his lips on hers. They worked in sync, feeding the horses, their silence comfortable but charged. Lucas had been different since the mountains, less guarded, more open, teaching her about the estate's horses, sharing stories of his childhood. He'd even started therapy, confronting the survivor's guilt that chained him to Trey's death, though he didn't talk about it much. Nia felt the shift like a door creaking open, but she knew storms were never far off. The storm arrived that afternoon in the form of Rhea Marshall and Simone Marshall. Rhea, Trey's sister, had been a thorn since the barn dance. Her grief twisted into rage at Lucas for surviving when her brother didn't. Simone, her friend, was worse. A woman scorned by a past love, her venom sharp as a switchblade. They'd been spreading rumors, whispering to the staff that Nia was a gold digger, a mute, nobody who'd conned her way into the Hayes fortune. The gossip stung, but Nia ignored it, her focus on her classes, on Lucas, on the fragile hope growing between them. She was in the main house, polishing silver in the dining room, when Rhea and Simone barged in. The chandelier above glittered, its light bouncing off the mahogany table, but the air turned cold. Rhea's silk blouse was pristine, her eyes burning while Simone's heels clicked like a countdown. "Well, look at the little maid," Simone sneered, circling Nia like a vulture. "Playing house with a billionaire. How much is Amos paying you to fake it?" Nia's hands tightened on the rag, her jaw clenching. She signed, "I'm not faking anything." "Leave me alone." Rhea laughed, sharp and cruel. "You can't even talk, and you think you belong here. Lucas is broken, but he's not desperate. You're just a pity project." The words cut deep, and Nia's eyes stung. She scribbled, "I'm here because I choose to be. You don't know me." She held it up, her hand steady despite the tremor in her chest. Simone snatched the note, crumpling it. "We know enough," she said, stepping closer, her perfume cloying. "You're a fraud, and we'll make sure everyone sees it." She shoved Nia, her nails grazing Nia's arm, and Nia stumbled, her shoulder hitting the wall. Before she could react, Lucas's voice sliced through the room. "Enough!" he roared, rolling in from the hall, his eyes blazing. "Get the hell out, both of you!" "Now." Ria froze her face, paling, but Simone smirked undeterred. "Protecting your little charity case," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's not worth it, Lucas. She's worth more than you'll ever be." He snapped his hands, gripping his chair. "Leave, or I'll have you dragged out." The women left. Ria's glare promising trouble, Simone's heels echoing like a threat. Nia stood frozen, her breath ragged tears welling. Lucas rolled closer, his voice softening. "You okay?" She shook her head, signing, "I'm tired of being nobody." She turned and fled, her boots pounding the floor, out to the pasture where the hills rose gentle and free. The sun was sinking, painting the sky in pinks and golds, and she collapsed on a grassy knoll, her tears soaking the earth. Clarksdale felt like a lifetime ago, but the pain was the same, being unseen, unheard, a shadow in her own story. The estate's annual horse race was the next day, a spectacle of wealth and pride. The pastures were transformed with bleachers, banners, and a track circling the hills. The staff buzzed, the gentry arrived in tailored suits and sundresses, and the air smelled of barbecue and anticipation. Nia had been roped into helping her denim skirt swapped for a flowy green dress that hugged her curves, her curls loose under a wide-brimmed hat. She carried trays of sweet tea, dodging drunk spectators, her heart heavy from yesterday's fight. Lucas was at the center of it all, his wheelchair parked by the judge's stand, his flannel traded for a crisp white shirt that made her pulse skip. Keisha was there, her guitar slung over her shoulder, ready to play for the crowd. "Girl, you look like a queen," she said, nudging Nia. "But you got that. I'm gonna punch someone face." "Spill," Nia signed. "Just tired of snakes like Simone." She scribbled, "Keep your eyes on Lucas. Something's off." Keisha nodded, her dreadlocks bouncing. "I got you, sis. But if that boy breaks your heart, I'm breaking his wheels." The race began, hooves thundering, the crowd roaring. Nia watched from the sidelines, her eyes on Lucas, who was judging the event. His face tense. She didn't see Simone slip into the stable, didn't see her tamper with a carriage harness until it was too late. The final event was a carriage race, a nod to tradition, and Lucas was to ride in one, a symbolic gesture. Nia's gut twisted as the carriage rolled out. Lucas gripping the reins, a groom at his side. The horses surged, the crowd cheered, and then it happened. The harness snapped, the carriage lurching wildly, careening toward a ditch. Nia's heart stopped. The crowd screamed, but she was already running, her dress tearing at the hem, her hat flying off. Lucas was trapped, the groom thrown clear. The horses panicked. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. Her voice, locked away for 11 years, broke free in a raw, desperate cry. "Stop!" She shouted the word, tearing from her throat, echoing over the hills. The horses faltered, startled, and Nia reached the carriage, grabbing the reins. Her hands bleeding as she pulled with all her strength. The carriage skidded, tipping, and she lunged, dragging Lucas free just as it crashed into the ditch, wood-splintering, dust rising. They hit the grass, Nia's body shielding his, her breath ragged. The crowd was silent, stunned, and then Keisha's voice cut through, screaming, "Nia, you're a damn hero." Nia knelt beside Lucas, her hands checking him for injuries, tears streaming down her face. He was conscious, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, but alive. His eyes locked on hers, wide with awe. "You spoke," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You saved me." She touched her throat, trembling, and signed. "I did it for you." Her voice was gone again, but the word lingered, a miracle born of love and fear. The crowd surged, medics rushing in, but Lucas waved them off his hand, gripping Nia's. "You're my miracle," he said, pulling her close, his lips crashing against hers. The kiss was desperate, fierce tasting of dust and tears, his hands tangling in her curls, her dress hiked up as she knelt beside him. The hills stood witness, the sun sinking behind them. And when they broke apart, Nia's heart was a drumbeat. Her world forever changed. Simone was nowhere to be seen, her sabotage uncovered by a groom who'd spotted her near the stable. Ria stood frozen in the crowd, her face a mask of shock, her anger crumbling. Keisha pushed through her guitar, banging against her hip. "Nia, you yelled like a banshee," she said, half laughing, half crying. "Simone's running scared, and I'm claiming credit for your glow-up." Nia signed, her hands shaky. "Good. I'm done playing nice." But her eyes were on Lucas, his hand still in hers, and she knew the fight wasn't over. Simone's sabotage was a warning. Ria's grief, a ticking bomb, and Darius's betrayal still loomed. Nia had found her voice, if only for a moment, but the cost was high, and the hills of Charlottesville held secrets that could break them both. As the medics helped Lucas to a stretcher, Nia stood, her dress torn, her hands bloodied, but her head high. She was no longer the silent girl from Clarksdale. She was a force, and Lucas was her reason to fight. The Hayes estate in Charlottesville was a symphony of summer, its pastures glowing under a Virginia sun that painted the hills in shades of emerald and gold. The stables stood proud, their cedar walls warmed by the scent of hay and horses, while the vineyard's grapes hung heavy, promising wine as bold as the Shenandoah Valley itself. The lake by the main house shimmered a quiet mirror for the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the air buzzed with cicadas and the faint twang of a distant radio. For Nia Coleman, it was no longer a cage, but a canvas where every day painted her closer to the woman she was meant to be. A month had passed since the horse race, since the carriage crash that could have taken Lucas Hayes from her. Nia's shout. Stop had torn through her silence, a miracle born of desperation. But her voice had retreated again, locked behind the grief of her mama's death. The estate was abuzz with the aftermath. Simone Marshall, exposed for sabotaging the carriage, had fled her whereabouts. Unknown, Ria Marshall, Trey's sister, had gone quiet, her anger dulled by the shock of Nia's bravery. The staff no longer whispered about Nia. They nodded with respect, some even signing clumsy thank yous she'd taught them. She was still bound by the forged will that made her, Lucas's wife, a lie orchestrated by her cousin Darius. But she'd stopped fighting it. The estate was home, and Lucas was her heart. Nia stood in the vineyard now, her denim skirt dusted with earth, her white tank top loose but clinging to her curves as she tied vines to trellises. Her curls were pulled into a high bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face, and her skin glowed under the sun. Lucas was nearby, his wheelchair parked under an oak, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, a notebook in his lap as he sketched the hills. His therapy, both physical and mental, was working. He'd stood briefly last week, his legs shaky but defiant, and his survivor's guilt was loosening its grip. He caught her eye, grinning, his scar catching the light. "You're gonna turn those grapes into gold?" "Nia," he called, his voice warm. "Ever think of running this place?" She smirked. "Signing only if I can fire your grumpy butt." She scribbled a note. "Stick to sketching, cowboy. You're no farmer." He He laughed, the sound rich as the valley's soil. Fair enough, darling. But I'm keeping you around for the view. Her cheeks warmed, but she tossed a grape at him, her aim perfect. The playful ease between them was new, a rhythm built on trust. Since the cave, since his confession about being a billionaire. Nia had started speech therapy using blues music to coax her voice, a suggestion from Keisha, who'd stayed on the estate, her guitar a constant in their lives. The sessions were slow, painful, but Nia felt the lock loosening her mama's memory. A melody she could almost sing. The estate was gearing up for a blues concert, a fundraiser for a local youth center Nia had championed. She'd been teaching kids there, signing stories of Hughes and Hurston, and the concert was her idea, a way to give back to honor her mama's love of blues. The pasture was transformed into a stage with lanterns strung between oaks, picnic tables groaning under BBQ ribs, cornbread, and Miss Hattie's gumbo. The air smelled of smoke and spices, and the crowd staff, locals and gentry, milled about their chatter, mingling with Keisha's warm-up riffs on her guitar. Nia was backstage, her green dress flowing its hem, brushing her knees, her curls loose and wild. She adjusted a microphone, her hands steady despite the nerves. Keisha sidled up her dreadlocks tied with a red scarf, her leather vest gleaming. "You ready to steal the show, Queen?" she teased, strumming a chord. "Or you planning to hide behind my guitar all night?" Nia signed. "I'm helping, not hiding," she wrote. "Don't trip over your ego, rock star." Keisha cackled, her laugh loud enough to turn heads. "Girl, I'm tripping over your glow-up. That cowboy's got you shining like a delta moon." Nia's cheeks burned, but she couldn't deny it. Lucas was front and center, his wheelchair by a table, his white shirt crisp, his eyes locked on her like she was the only star in the sky. The concert began, Keisha's blues filling the night, her voice a smoky prayer that brought the crowd to its feet. Nia worked the sidelines, passing out programs, her dress catching the lantern light, her smile bright, despite the ache in her chest. Darius's betrayal still stung, and the $500,000 he'd taken from Amos was a debt she felt responsible for. The surprise came mid-concert when Miss Hattie took the stage, her silver braids gleaming, her voice soft but commanding. "This night's for Nia," she said, her eyes finding her granddaughter. "But it's also for my daughter Lila, who loved blues like breath. She was a giver, and she gave to someone you all know." Nia froze her hands, stilling. Hattie's gaze landed on Lucas, and the crowd hushed. "Years ago in Clarksdale, Lila found a boy sleeping in an alley," Hattie said, "a runaway broke and hungry. She fed him, gave him a couch, taught him to love blues. That boy was Lucas Hayes." Nia's breath caught her eyes, snapping to Lucas. His face was pale, his hands gripping his chair, but he nodded, his voice low. "It's true," he said loud enough for the crowd. "Nia Coleman saved me. I was 16, running from a bad home. She gave me hope, and I never forgot her." The revelation hit Nia like a wave. Her mama, the woman whose death had silenced her, had shaped the man she loved. She signed, her hands trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lucas rolled closer, his eyes raw. "I didn't know she was your mama till Hattie told me last week. I wanted to help you, Nia, to repay her. That's why I fought for you. Why I'm still fighting." Tears welled and Nia's throat tightened, a melody stirring where her voice should be. The crowd was silent, their faces soft, and Keisha strummed a slow chord, her voice joining Hattie's in Ain't No Sunshine. Nia stepped onto the stage, her hands signing the lyrics, her body swaying, and for a moment she felt her mama's spirit, her blues alive in the night. Lucas watched, his eyes shining, and when the song ended, the crowd roared their applause, a tide lifting her up. The concert was a triumph, raising thousands for the youth center, but the night wasn't done. Amos Hayes approached Nia backstage, his tailored suit at odds with his weathered face. "I was wrong to bring you here with a lie," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "You're family now, Nia. Stay not because of papers, but because you belong." She signed. "Thank you." But her heart was with Lucas, who was waiting by the lake, the lanterns casting a warm glow over his face. Rhea Marshall appeared, her silk dress replaced by jeans, her eyes red but clear. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I was wrong about you, Nia. About Lucas." "I want to help the center if you'll let me," Nia nodded, signing. "We all hurt. Let's heal together." Rhea's shoulders sagged, relief washing over her, and she left her steps lighter. Simone was still gone. Her absence, a quiet victory, but Nia knew she'd return. The debt from Darius lingered, but Nia had confronted him last week at a Charlottesville dive bar, her courage fueled by Lucas's lawyers who'd recovered the $500,000. The money was back with Amos, but the betrayal was a scar she'd carry. As the crowd thinned, Nia and Lucas slipped away to the stream behind the vineyard. Its waters silver under the moon, Keisha had dragged Hattie to the house, muttering about needing a nap after all this drama, leaving them alone. Nia's dress was damp from the night's heat, her curls loose, and Lucas's shirt was unbuttoned, his chest catching the starlight. "You were magic tonight," he said, his voice low. "Your mama would be proud." She signed. I felt her. Then hesitating, she wrote, "I feel you too." His grin was pure trouble, and he tugged her closer, his hands on her hips. "Come with me," he said, rolling toward the stream. The water was shallow, cool, and Nia kicked off her shoes, stepping in the current, tickling her ankles. Lucas watched his eyes dark with want, and she splashed him. Her laugh silent but bright. He caught her wrist, pulling her down, and she straddled his lap, the water soaking her dress, her skin glowing under the moon. His lips found hers, a kiss slow and deep, tasting of wine and starlight. His hands slid up her back, fingers tracing her spine and her curls tangled in his grip, the stream swirling around them. The kiss was a vow, a promise of forever, and when they broke apart, Nia's heart was a song. She signed, her hands steady. "You're my home, and you're my sky," he said, his voice husky, his thumb brushing her cheek. Keisha's voice broke the moment, echoing from the farmhouse. "Y'all skinny dippin' now," she hollered, her guitar case banging. "I'm tellin'." "Hattie," Nia laughed, signing, "snitch and I'll hide your guitar." Lucas chuckled his arm around her, and they sat by the stream, the night wrapping them in its embrace. The concert had changed everything. Rhea's apology, Amos's acceptance, the truth about Lila, but the fight wasn't over. Simone's shadow loomed, and a letter Lucas hadn't shown Nia tucked in his wallet hinted at a truth about Trey's accident that could shatter them. Nia's voice was stirring her blues, a key to freedom. But the road ahead was steep, and the hills of Charlottesville held secrets that could break or bind them. As the stars burned, Nia leaned into Lucas, her hand on his, and knew she'd fight for this, for him, for her voice, for the love that had found her in the Delta and followed her to the mountains. The farmhouse by the lake in Charlottesville was a sanctuary, its clapboard walls weathered but warm, its porch creaking under the weight of new dreams. The Shenandoah Valley stretched beyond its hills, lush with summer's last green, the vineyards heavy with grapes, and the Blue Ridge Mountains, standing sentinel under a sky of endless blue. The lake sparkled, its surface dancing with sunlight, and the air carried the sweet hum of honeysuckle, the faint neigh of horses from the Hayes estate, and the promise of forever. For Nia Coleman, it was home. Not the Clarksdale cotton fields of her past, but a place where her heart had taken root, tethered to the man whose love had unlocked her soul. 3 years had passed since the blues concert that changed everything, since Miss Hattie's revelation that Nia's Mama Leela had saved a young Lucas Hayes. tying their fates long before their moonlit kiss in the Delta. Nia's life was a tapestry now woven with threads of courage and love. Her psychosomatic muteness, born of Lila's death, was fading through speech therapy, her voice emerging in soft, careful words, each one a victory. She graduated with a degree in literature, her nights of studying Hughes and Hurston paying off, and now taught at a Charlottesville elementary school, signing stories to kids who hung on her every gesture. The youth center she'd championed thrived. Its walls lined with books and dreams, and she'd opened a community library named Lila's Light, a tribute to her mama's blues. Nia stood in the schoolyard now, her sundress a soft yellow that glowed against her brown skin, her curls loose and wild, catching the breeze. She was reading to a group of kids, her hands signing as her voice, still fragile, shaped the words of their eyes were watching God. The kids clapped their faces bright, and Nia's heart swelled, her silence no longer a chain, but a bridge to their world. Lucas watched from the gate, his wheelchair traded for crutches, his legs stronger every day. His therapy, physical and mental, had rebuilt him, his survivor's guilt, a shadow kept at bay by love and time. His flannel shirt was open at the collar, his scar a faint line, and his green-gray eyes held a pride that made Nia's pulse skip. "You're a natural," he said, limping closer as the kids ran off to play. "Those kids'd follow you to the moon." Nia smiled, signing. "Only if you're driving." She scribbled a note. "You here to flirt or help with recess?" He grinned, the trouble in his eyes as potent as ever. "Flirting's my default, darling, but I'll push a swing if you say pretty please first." Her laugh was silent but bright, and she tossed a chalk stick at him, her aim perfect. The ease between them was a melody built on years of trust, of fights and forgiveness. The forged will that had brought her to Charlottesville was a distant memory, its debt repaid when Nia confronted Darius at that dive bar. Lucas's lawyers, recovering the $500,000 Amos Hayes, gruff but loving, had welcomed her as family, his estate, a backdrop to their new life. Rhea Marshall had found peace working at the youth center to honor her brother Trey. Her apologies, a quiet healing. Simone Marshall was gone. Her sabotage, a fading scar, though whispers of her lingered like a ghost. The farmhouse was their haven, its walls adorned with Nia's sketches and Lucas's old travel photos, a blend of their pasts and hopes. They'd moved here a year ago, trading the estate's grandeur for simplicity, and Nia loved its quirks, the creaky stairs, the kitchen where Miss Hattie still cooked gumbo, the porch where Keisha strummed blues. Their daughter Grace was too, her curls, a mirror of Nia's, her giggle, a song that filled the house. Nia taught her to sign Lucas, taught her to laugh, and together they dreamed of her future college adventures, a life free of the pain they'd known. Tonight was special. The grand opening of Lila's Light, the library. Nia had poured her heart into. The building was modest, a converted barn by the lake, its shelves packed with books, its walls painted with murals of Delta blues and Virginia hills. Lanterns hung from the rafters casting a warm glow, and tables groaned under BBQ cornbread and Hattie's peach cobbler. The community gathered kids from the school staff, from the estate locals who'd become family. Keisha was tuning her guitar, her dreadlocks tied with a blue scarf, her leather vest swapped for a flowy blouse. "You ready to christen this place, Queen?" she asked, winking. "Or you planning to let me steal the spotlight?" Nia signed. "Steal it, and I'll burn your strings," she wrote. "Just don't scare the kids with your warbling," Keisha cackled, her laugh echoing. "Warbling, girl, I'm Etta James reborn. You better bring your A-game tonight." Nia's stomach fluttered. She was set to sing a blues number, her first public performance since her voice began returning. Her therapy using music to unlock her words had been slow, but the notes were there, raw and real. Lucas had been her rock, sitting through every session, his hand in hers as she stumbled over sounds. She glanced at him now, helping Grace stack blocks by a table, his smile soft but fierce. He caught her eye, mouthing, "You got this," and her nerves steadied. The opening began. Amos giving a gruff speech about community, Ria sharing a quiet tribute to Trey. Nia took the stage, her yellow dress catching the lantern light, her curls framing her face. The crowd hushed, their faces warm, and Keisha strummed the opening chords of "I'd Rather Go Blind." Nia's hands signed the lyrics, her body swaying, and then she sang, her voice soft but clear, each word a step toward freedom. "I'd rather go blind, boy, than to see you walk away from me." The notes trembled raw with her mama's memory, with the love that had carried her from Clarksdale to here. Lucas's eyes locked on hers, shining with tears, and the crowd was silent, spellbound. Nia's voice grew stronger, the blues a prayer, a promise. And when the song ended, she spoke her words steady. "You gave me my voice," she said, looking at Lucas, her heart bare. "I love you." The crowd erupted, clapping, cheering, some wiping tears. Lucas limped to the stage, his crutches steady, and pulled her into his arms, his lips crashing against hers. The kiss was fierce, tasting of salt and starlight, his hands tangling in her curls, her dress soft against his shirt. The barn spun away, leaving just them, and when they broke apart, Nia's laugh was a melody, her voice a gift she'd fought for. Keisha whooped, her guitar raised. "Y'all kissing like it's the movies," she hollered. "I'm claiming credit for this love fest." Nia signed. "Keep dreaming, rock star." But her smile was radiant, her hand in Lucas's, and the night felt infinite. The celebration continued. Kids dancing, Hattie passing out cobbler, Amos grumbling but beaming, but a shadow lingered. That morning, Lucas had found a letter in his mailbox, anonymous and chilling. "Trey's accident wasn't what you think. Ask Amos." He hadn't told Nia, his heart torn between truth and peace, but the words gnawed at him, a secret that could unravel their world. Simone's name whispered in the wind, her absence a threat, and the estate's future hung in the balance. As the crowd thinned, Lucas led Nia to the Appalachian mountains, to the cave where they'd kissed years ago. The farmhouse was too small for what he needed to say, and the cave with its quartz walls and hidden stream was their sanctuary. The night was cool, the stars bright, and Nia's dress glowed under the lantern he carried. They stood by the stream, the water lapping softly, and Lucas set his crutches aside, standing with effort, his hands steadying on her shoulders. "Nia," he said, his voice rough. "You're my everything. I don't deserve you, but I'm asking anyway." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a black pearl set in gold, its shine a nod to her delta roots. "Marry me again, for real this time." Her breath caught tears welling, and she nodded, signing, "We'll do it together." She slipped the ring on her hands, trembling, and kissed him, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of forever. His fingers traced her spine, her dress soft against his chest, and the cave held them close. Its whispers, a vow of their own. They returned to the farmhouse, Grace asleep in Hattie's arms, Keisha strumming a lullaby. "You two planning a cave honeymoon?" Keisha teased, her eyes twinkling. "I'm booking my invite now." Nia wrote, "Bring your guitar, not your mouth." But her laugh was bright, her heart full. The next morning, Lucas found another letter. This one slipped under the farmhouse door. "The truth is closer than you think." His hand shook as he hid it, his eyes on Nia, who was signing to Grace, her voice soft as she hummed a blues tune. The secret loomed a storm on the horizon, but Lucas held her close, their love a flame that could weather anything, or so he hoped. The hills of Charlottesville stood watch, their secrets buried deep, and Nia's blues were a beacon guiding them toward a future they'd have to fight for. Their story wasn't perfect. There were days when Nia's voice faltered, when Lucas's legs ached, when the weight of their pasts pressed close. But they faced them together. Their love, a steady fire, a testament to the power of connection, of choosing each other despite the odds. The Delta had whispered their beginning. The mountains their promise, and the future uncertain shadowed would test them. But Nia and Lucas were ready. Their hands entwined their hearts, a song that would never fade. Hey folks, what a soulful ride. Did Nia and Lucas's love light your heart? Share your favorite moment in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe with the bell for more epic tales of love and grit. Thanks for joining us, and stay bluesy.